Hi, everybody. It's good to see you. Lily, hi.
Hello.
Davy, good to see
Hey,
you.
hey, Al.
Hey, Erica.
Hi, Al.
And Camara, hi.
Hi, Al.
We're going to talk about a poem by Eve Ewing. It's called I Saw Emmett Till This Week at the Grocery Store. I know we all have a lot to say about it. But first, Camara, I wonder if you would read it for us.
Of course. I saw Emmett Till this week at the grocery store, looking over the plums one by one, lifting each to his eyes and turning it slowly, a little earth, checking the smooth skin for pockmarks and rot or signs of unkind days or people, then sliding them gently into the plastic, whistling softly, reaching with a slim woolen arm into the cart. He first bounced them over the wire before realizing the danger of bruising and lifting them back out, cradling them in the crook of his elbow until something harder could take that bottom space. I knew him from his hat, one of those fine pork pie numbers that they used to sell on Roosevelt Road. It had lost its feather, but he had carefully folded a dollar bill and slid it between the ribbon and the felt, and it stood at attention. He wore his money. Upright and strong, he was all ready to the checkout by the time I caught up with him. I called out his name, and he spun like a dancer, candy bar in hand, looked at me quizzically for a moment before remembering my face. He smiled. Well, hello, young lady. Hello. So chilly today. Should have worn my warm coat like you. Yes, so cool for August in Chicago. How are things going for you? Oh. He sighed and put the candy on the belt. It goes. It goes.
Thank you so much. Well, there are two important references here that we should start with. One is a poetic reference to Allen Ginsberg's The Supermarket in California, and the other is to the life and death of Emmett Till. So why don't we spell both of those out? Davy, tell us a little bit about the Ginsberg in the context here.
So the Ginsberg is in dialogue here as a poem in which the speaker, the first person speaker of that poem, sees Walt Whitman and sees a number of other folks shopping in a supermarket in the East Bay in California, and has an imagined interaction with an elder Walt Whitman, and they leave the supermarket and go off together. And their imagined interaction is being referenced here in the imagined interaction between the speaker of this poem and Emmett Till.
Thank you. And we'll, I'm sure, get to more about the comparison with what Ginsberg is doing in that supermarket a little later, what Ewing is doing there. But why don't we go to Emmett Till? Let's all do that reference together. I think everybody watching this video will already know the story. Emmett Till of Chicago is visiting relatives in Money, Mississippi. There's an implicit pun in there. He's in a store. It may not be a grocery store. It's more of a five and dime. And he is perceived by an adult white woman as having been sassy with her. And then he is murdered in a way that's horrifically violent. So his mom, Mamie, made sure that the whole world got to see what it was like, what his body was like, came back to Chicago. So it's really a Chicago poem in some ways. So who wants to add to that, the Emmett Till that we see here? Anything further? Camara, any thoughts about the Emmett Till that we see here?
Sorry, do you mean about the biographical details, or do you mean
or how the history, we can start on how the history works in the poem.
Well, the title of the poem, right, I saw Emmett Till this week at the grocery store, is a sort of is bringing us into, a present moment. But of course, Emmett Till was murdered in 1955. So this is seemingly a sort of imagined interaction with him.
Right.
The contemporary moment.
And he's not old. He seems to be the age he was when he went to Money. I get it. I get the sense. Do we have any evidence of that?
I might actually produce a different sense. I get a different sense. And the sense that I get is that he is perhaps the age he would be in the present. So this is August 2020, he'd be 79. And a big difference between this poem and A Supermarket in California is that Ginsberg imagines a Walt Whitman who has lived, who has like been reincarnated or has lived far beyond his life expectancy.
That's right.
I think Ewing imagines Emmett Till were he not killed by racial violence and allowed to live his life and is a man in his late 70s. And the reason that I get that sense is that we get the language in Till's voice, hello, young lady, which to me really brings to mind a very caring, very careful, very gentle older person. And I think that that's a really important difference between Whitman in A Supermarket in California and Emmett Till in this poem.
Yes. No, you're totally right. And I really like, I want to turn to Erica next. I really like the way the elder Emmett Till has put a little dollar bill in his hat. There's something very proper and spiffy, really, about him here. Erica, what's your thought about the way Emmett Till appears in this rewriting of the Ginsberg thing?
I was thinking very much what Davy just said, where, this is a poem that, depicts what could have been an ordinary day in Emmett Till's life had he not been horribly murdered when he was 14.
Yeah.
Like he's doing things that one might do as a grown-up. Go to the store. There's this beautiful moment in the middle of the poem where his hat is described, and I love the attention to the details of the hat, and it's also just sad. Yeah,
it's still the pork pie hat. So this is an alternative history that I think David is suggesting, where, that this is a boy who then became a man who always styled with a pork pie hat. Yep. And of course, everybody who remembers the photos of him before his trip from Chicago to Money remember him in that hat, which is sort of pressed down a little sideways. Lily, what do you make of the interaction with the young lady who could, after all, be the first person, Eve Ewing, or someone like Eve Ewing who encounters Emmett Till, and then he's so gentle and nice?
I think what is very devastating about this poem is that it's a relatively mundane day-to-day moment and interaction, and there is a beauty and a grace to how this figure of Emmett Till appears, because she imagines him to be a very poised and graceful person. But at the end of the day, this version of Emmett Till got to grow up and just do a regular thing, go and treat himself to some nice fruit from the supermarket. So to me, that interaction between them is cordial, neighborly, friendly way that strangers would interact. And it's very devastating because it's the kind of just normal interaction between two people that he was violently robbed of being able to do as an adult.
Camara, I want to turn to you. I respond if you want to what I'm about to say. I keep thinking about controversy is the wrong word, but the evidence gathered as to what the conversation in the store in Money, Mississippi was, right? Hateful racist people claim that he made a pass at a white woman. But this poem kind of implies that he might have said exactly what he's saying here. How are you today? And, trying to make conversation because he was a kid from the North and he thought you could do that. Do you think there's that kind of, Lily already pointed to the tragedy and sadness in that, but adding to it that this may be exactly the sort of thing that he said before he was murdered seems to make it even deeper. I don't know, maybe I'm overreading.
Yeah, I think the poem, while you're reading it, you can't help but not think about, him in that different store, right? And this interaction in this different store was the one that, led to his horrible murder. But I think that this, even though the poem is so in this moment, in this alternative history, in this like tender, imagination, that I think what's hard for me is that you can't escape that this is also not real, right? And so I don't think it's as concerned with, what could have happened in that store in Mississippi, where like it's not concerned with, whether or not he said whatever. I think the heartbreak is about that this wasn't possible, that this tenderness, this mundaneness was taken, right? And for me, the beginning with looking over the plums one by one, and the tenderness and the gentleness with which the speaker describes him like continuously looking and checking for bruises on this plum. It's the speaker's trying to keep us here, and you can't just stay there. And that is what's really hard for me.
Yes.
You can't just stay with him looking at these plums.
Thank you. That makes me want to turn our attention to the opening and back to Ginsberg's Whitman, because Eve Ewing is implying an analogy. Ginsberg is to Whitman, or Ginsberg in the story is to Whitman, as Ewing is to Emmett Till, which is to say, Till is a Whitmanian figure, at least in comparing the two poems. And the Whitman, the lonely old grubber, so-called, in the Ginsberg poem, is carefully eyeing fruits and vegetables and meat. And here Till is really doing the same kind of close observation. So I wonder if all of us could just add a thought, starting with Lily. When you read the poem, you think, oh my gosh, I know Supermarket California. Emmett Till is like the Whitman figure. And what do we do with that?
Well, okay, maybe this is a slightly different reading than what you were saying, but to me, the idea of I saw Emmett Till or I saw Walt Whitman means two things at once to me. Like it means I imagined that I was able to interact with that real person, Emmett Till, or that real person, Walt Whitman. But to me, it also means like this 70-year-old man that I, Eve Ewing, really did see at the supermarket last week could have been Emmett Till.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's in the Whitman poem, too, in the Ginsberg poem too, in a way, right? Yeah, this is probably just a homeless person in the supermarket, and I thought he was Whitman, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow, so I want to explore that, Lily. I mean, how does it feel for Eve Ewing to see a person and think, that could be Emmett Till? I think this gentle person is Emmett Till.
I mean, obviously, now I'm not speaking for Eve Ewing. I'm just thinking probably very painful, like it to say I am casting forward this person's legacy onto every 70-something-year-old man that I can interact with at the supermarket, which happens every day.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Nice start to this. Okay. Davy, you next. You've already brought this up, but let's go back to the Whitman-Till implicit comparison or analogy or structure.
It's something that I think is importantly different about the relationship between the speaker and the figure that they see, Emmett Till in the case of this poem, is that it's really a relation. I really think about this as a Chicago poem. It's really a relationship to place. That Ginsberg is imagining a kind of, Ginsberg is imagining cruising Walt Whitman, so that's an important distinction. But he's also imagining, like, what if Whitman lived at a different moment? Let's produce like a non-emotionally fraught hypothetical of like, what if Whitman and I could have been buddies, and Whitman were here, and I transposed this like familiar feeling figure and this familiar feeling queer figure to this place. And that's a little bit different of a thought exercise of what if I, the speaker of the poem, if we take that speaker as Eve Ewing, who we know is a importantly Chicago-based and Chicago-oriented writer, and also a sociologist, in addition to being a poet and someone who thinks a lot about kids and systems and the way that kids belong to cities.
Eve Ewing.
Eve Ewing, yeah.
Right.
And if we take that frame, and it's a different thought experiment to think about what if someone who was robbed of his life by racist violence continued to share my city with me,
Yes.
continued to have a relationship to Chicago. And I think that shared implacedness is really important.
Yeah.
That it's not that Whitman was ever in Berkeley or belonged to Berkeley. It's not that Whitman and Ginsberg shared the space of Berkeley. It's a kind of, it's a form of implacedness because it's a form of like shared feeling that Ginsberg has. And I think the fact that Eve Ewing and Emmett Till are both people from and importantly grounded in Chicago matters to this poem. That it's not incidental that it's a Chicago poem. It's not incidental that the hat comes from Roosevelt Road.
Right, exactly. I want to follow that up and turn to Camara next and then Erica. Camara, you're a Chicago person too. And I keep thinking that, following from what David just said, that, you know, the Emmett Till story is partly about a temporary reversal of the Great Migration. The Till family moved up from that area to Chicago, and then he became a northern urban citizen as a young man, and then went back. And reversing the Great Migration was, you know, you have to learn a whole set of rules that he was maybe too young to learn entirely about Jim Crow. And I think Davy's right. I mean, this is really a Chicago. Eve Ewing is imagining what if Emmett Till was remembered always as a Chicagoan. Anyway, your thought about the Chicago-ness of this story and of Eve Ewing and Emmett Till together?
Yeah, this does, to me, this is also a really Chicago poem, like Roosevelt Road. Yes, so cool for August in Chicago. Not just the Chicago references inside of it, but I think that it is, I don't know, it feels a little personal. Also, I didn't grow up in Chicago proper. I grew up in a western suburb of Chicago called Oak Park. But it feels, the specificity of the poem to Chicago makes it feel as if like I could have also like imagined this scenario. And so I don't know, it's a pretty I'm still thinking about what Lily said about painful, you know, how this is like a painful projection, or not projection, or imagining, or like sawing or witnessing, etc., even if it's such a gentle narrative. And yeah, I think the funeral happening in Emmett Till's funeral happening, you know, in Chicago, and Mamie Till deciding to show and spread around the picture of Emmett's face. I think also, I don't know, it speaks to the local sort of violence being dispersed nationally. And I think also in a moment where the murders of Black people by police in different areas also gets the video becomes of this murder becomes this way where the local also gets dispersed nationally, and the rage and the feelings or whatever also gets mobilized everywhere. And I'm thinking about the specificness of the Midwest here, you know, and how that is super important, not only thinking about, you know, Eve Ewing as the poet and Emmett Till and this violence, but also in the violence we're seeing today. So yeah, definitely Chicago.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate everything that you said, but one of the points you made is especially powerful, which is the dispersal that you're talking about, this dispersal of image and story. You know, Mamie Till insisted on that dispersal. She insisted that everybody in the country, you know, front page magazine story, that you could say that this was the first of those. You really could.
Yeah, and and the fact that, you know, like no one has ever been charged for, or for the violence, for the murders of Emmett Till also, feels resonant with the, um, with the violence and the lack of accountability and justice we see today. But I'll rest.
Yeah, thank you. What I want to do as we wrap up is turn back to the plums at the beginning, the close examination of them, and then the candy at the end. So the 70-something Emmett Till is doing close examination. It's not clear to me anyway that he decides to buy any of those plums. We do know that he puts candy on the belt, which is to say the what do you call it, the checkout belt. So he's buying the candy. And then says in a sigh, it goes, which is something we can talk about. So who wants to start on this? Is he there to buy plums? Has he decided that the plums are not good enough? And he settles for candy? Maybe he had candy in mind all the time. Lily?
Well, this could be revealing a lot about my personal way that I shop at the grocery store, but what I imagined this to be was that like he went to the supermarket for the fruit and the candy was like a last minute, well, it's here under the thing. I'm just gonna grab, it's like a treat for myself, like pick up a little candy bar, but the plums were really what I came in for.
Yeah.
And I don't know, all of these, like I said before, all of these very details that I'm calling them small because they feel small compared to some of the much bigger topics we've just talked about in this video. But like, obviously Eve Ewing doesn't think they're small, but moments of just going through your day-to-day shopping, like the more details that are included and the more you focus on them, like the heavier and sadder it feels to me, because they're just luxuries of a daily life of a living person, like nice things you can do.
Yes, thank you. Davy, the examination of plums takes up half the poem.
Yeah, and I read the figure buying the plums, the imagined late 70s Emmett Till as buying them. And I think that the detail that is so striking to me is the moment of examining them, putting them in the bag, deciding to perhaps put the bag in the cart, and then being worried that they'll get squished and instead cradling them. And it feels importantly like the exact opposite of relationships between other famous relationships between masculinity and plums in American poetry, which I can't not think about. This is just to say, and a moment in which Williams's like horrible toxic masculinity steals his wife's plums, that this is a moment in which like Till's imagined masculinity is expressed in his like tremendous carrying, like he's carrying the plums like a baby. They're in the crook of his arm.
Yes.
And that feels like a reference here too, of thinking about that, like part of, like we've been talking about, like this poem imagining Emmett Till being allowed to live his life, like had he in this imaginary in which he had not been horribly murdered. And it's what we get in this poem is the tremendous carefulness and sweetness of this like attentive and generous person who is just having this like loving relationship with these plums in the supermarket, of just being like so careful and kind to this like other like non-human like this other thing. And that carefulness and sweetness is importantly part of what is lost, and is also, I think, a contrast, is meant to be heard as a contrast to Williams being just exercising his carelessness all over Flossie's plums.
Yeah. I mean, I think Ginsberg invokes Whitman in some very indirect way. I think you're suggesting that Williams appropriates his avariciousness, or whatever the word is, appetitiousness, from Whitman as well in that plum poem. We're going in a different direction here, Erica. To follow what Davy said, this person is not only going to take very good care with and of the plums, but is also proudly going to pay. He wore his money upright and strong. He's going to the checkout counter. He's going to pay. And there is a pride of participating in the store, local economy of the store. And then the speaker calls out his name, and he's spun like a dancer, candy bar in hand. looked at the speaker quizzically for a moment before remembering my face. It seems that the imagined Emmett Till knows the speaker. Help us with that. That lead, spins like a dancer. And there's something really, as Davy's been saying, gentle, but also proud and communal about the scene. Take it from there, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all building up to this portrait of, a life that was lost. And, it's the person who's coming through in this description is somebody who in many ways is just your average citizen who's participating in the economy, who takes pride in his appearance, and who, every detail is building up to, in some ways, that moment where you see his body move in a way that's more than just cradling the plums.
Yeah.
You kind of witness how he is going to address a person talking to him, and the way that he does that is graceful.
Yeah. There's grace, even the way he balances the plums in the wire of the shopping basket, seems to me. Camara, I want to turn to you, but I also want to sort of introduce a final round. In this final round, I hope we will all say something about the end. Decide, put the candy on the belt, and then italicize as if to say it's still part of his speech. It goes, it goes. Camara, I invite you to say anything you want about that, and then we'll go quickly around for final thoughts as well.
Yeah, it goes, signals to me a sort of continuing, the goings on, keep goings on. And it also feels sort of like a refrain that what is going on is not just, in this poem itself is the everyday, it goes, but also this sort of anti-Blackness, the conditions that led to his murder also goes and goes. But I also, one quick thing that I was thinking of is that one possibility is also that, in that Emmett Till also appeared to the speaker as a figure, as like as in other spiritual religious traditions, as like someone who showed up as an ancestor and who remembered her. And so I also want to give some acknowledgement to that possibility as well.
Oh, I think that's such a great point. I'm glad you brought it up, and it'd be interesting if we have time to throw in what Ginsberg is doing. I mean, there's something ancestral about the Whitman figure in that, poetically speaking anyway, in that poem as well. I really like that. So it's not like some sci-fi thing where, how could this be? Emmett Till is not alive, but more like Emmett Till is in every store that I go to, like I'm going to find him where I need to. Lily, Davy, Erica, quick thoughts about the it goes, about the ending. Lily first.
Thinking about what you said, Al, about the communal feeling and the familiarity of this, like, this seems like something you would say to a friend or a person that it's like, I'm not going to give a full answer, but yeah, it's going, and that's a kind of a daily intimacy that is like, he's not accounting for his whole life. They're not catching up after a long period of time. It's like they seem to sort of like have a glancing intimacy. Maybe they see each other kind of frequently, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, someone asks, we assume it's him, how are things going for you? And then which means either there's something missing in the conversation that we don't get, or he's listened to what she said and says, oh, and then it goes. So how's it going? It goes. Davy, work that out a little bit, will you?
Something that is interesting to me about those lines is, at least to me, and I'm curious as to what y'all think about this, in the final lines of the poem, I'm not sure who the speaker is.
Right.
And I'm interested in that uncertainty, is that for as far as well, hello, young lady. Hello, so chilly today. Should have worn my warm coat like you. Yes, so cool for August in Chicago. I read that all as imagined late 70s Emmett Till. I feel, Al, as you were glossing those last few lines, unsure about who the speaker is. Is that a response from the speaker of the poem? Is that a continued discourse from imagined late 70s Emmett Till, or ancestral? Is this like Camara, I love your thought of this being like a spiritual interaction with a felt ancestry with Emmett Till. And I think that uncertainty for me is a real shift in register, in that I feel pretty sure about what's happening everywhere else in this poem, and I feel really unsure at the end. And that uncertainty makes this moment, makes like the sweetness and clarity of this moment, the little earth of the plums, disappear. And I think that shift, what feels to me like a shift in tone, is important, in that part of what's going is the disappearance of this moment. This very sweet interaction is something that we can't keep. We don't end with, at least in my reading of the poem, with just like a perfect encapsulation of this imagined moment, but this kind of, this gentleness of this figure and of this interaction, this, what I think of incorrectly or correctly as an intergenerational interaction, disappears. We can't hang on to it. I think that's part of what's disappearing in the phrase "it goes."
Nice, thank you so much. Erica, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, to build on what Davy's saying, I had a similar reaction as far as the uncertainty that we're left with at the end. And it really complicates the whole pace of the poem. So because the tone of it changes at the end, but the way the poem reads is kind of consistently slow and careful and gentle. And then we're kind of left with this unknown, or with this moment that's dissolving. And, you know, it reminds me of, you know, like the idea that poems can actually do something. Like outside of the space of the page. Like, you know, as a reader, it leaves you feeling like you want to do something next. You know, like you want to disrupt or push back against the history that, you know, that made it impossible for Emmett Till to be alive to have a moment like this.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to do final thoughts. If you can do it quick, that would be great. We've said a lot about this poem, but there are surely more things to say. So we'll start with Lily. Final thought, one last thing.
I guess one final thought is we're definitely asked to think about this poem with specific context about Emmett Till, but I also like thinking of it as a prescriptive idea for how to go out and look at people in your neighborhood, like what it means to see someone every day at the supermarket, who they could be, you know, what history they could enclose in their life, I guess.
So that the close observation in the first half of the poem is really a kind of communal loving. I'm going to watch the way this old man interacts with the plums.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we should close watch. Yeah. Davy, final thought?
I just want to say what a great thought that is, that like this is a poem that is like instructive of how to observe the generosity of others as they go about their daily lives. Like, Lily, that's such a cool thought. Something else that occurs to me that I had thought to say before I was like just taken aback by what a perfect thought that was, is that we don't, for all the parallels with a supermarket in California, we really don't have a parallel with, my dog is having feelings, you can hear him in the background. And we really don't have a parallel with the moment of where are we going, Walt Whitman, the doors close in an hour, that we're talking about the ending of this poem. That imagined interaction is Ginsberg being like, okay, now Walt Whitman and I are gonna like walk out and like go for this walk in Berkeley and like have this evening together and have this like imagined like time that we get to spend together. And that doesn't happen here. That's really where the parallel shuts down. Is a supermarket in California doesn't entirely take place in the supermarket. And this poem really ends at the checkout counter. and is foreclosed in a way a supermarket in California, that imagined interaction is not.
Nice. I think I'm going to offer my final thought now because it follows a little bit from what Lily said and what Davy said about what Lily said, which is this powerful thing at the beginning. We see Emmett Till checking the smooth skin of the plums for pockmarks and rot or signs of unkind days or people. There's almost, and Davy hinted at this, a love of even the fruits and vegetables of our world, right? There's almost a kind of, in the spiritual sense, vegetarianism about this. If we look closely at the world that is a perfect plum and find its imperfections, we can feel signs or interpret signs of unkind days or unkind people, the hate in the world. And then this beautiful gesture, which is he doesn't seem to reject the imperfect plums. He slides them gently into a bag. There's something so knowing and learned. It goes for me with it goes along with the it goes, it goes. There's a kind of endurance here of this person. And, you know, Signs of Unkind Days is a pretty strong reference to the actuality of Emmett Till's story and of the racism, Jim Crowism that he sadly had to endure. So this is a really good move by Ewing. You can find a sign of unkind people in the fruit that's bruised and pockmarked if you're willing to look closely enough. Erica, final thought?
I would just really briefly, I want to draw our attention to how beautifully Ewing is using sentences and her decision as a writer to not capitalize the beginnings of sentences with the exception of the word I or proper nouns. I feel like that adds another level to a lot of what we've been saying about the poem.
Yeah, great, thank you, Erica. Camara, final thought.
For my final thought, I was thinking about how last year I got to go to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and they have Emmett Till's the casket that he was buried in there. And when I was there, there was a line, like an hour-long line to see the casket. And I was just thinking about how long waiting in that line felt to see that casket. And I was thinking about how that type of like presentation of the history was really concrete and also embodied when you're like waiting to see this casket. And I think that in a completely different way, I think this poem also brings me to my body and to the imagined or, you know, body of Emmett Till feeling these plums. And I think that it also feels really tangible and real to me in a different way, and also in a painful way. So yeah, I was just thinking about those moments together and how this also feels like a holding of him and a holding of a potential memory and alternative history of him.
Thank you, Camara. Thank you, Lily, Davy, Erica, and Camara once again. Thank you all.